Hello, I'm Nicole and I read a lot of translated fiction, so for my first YouTube video I thought I would recommend you 10 books from 10 different countries. My hope is that one day I will have read a book from every single country in the world, and if you're wanting to do something similar, here are 10 books that you could maybe get started with. For Mexico, I'm recommending Empty Houses by Brenda Navarro, and this follows two women with very contrasting lives. One of which is a mother who is dealing with the aftermath of the disappearance of her child, but whilst she's dealing with this grief, she's also questioning whether she was meant to have a child or meant to be a mother in the first place. Then on the other side of the coin, we have another woman who is desperate to be a mother and she's trying to protect the child that she has stolen. This book is super short, but also incredibly confronting and covers topics that would be considered maybe taboo or just really difficult to discuss. It touches on what the reality of motherhood can be, and although it can be filled with happiness, it can also be filled with regret. This is one of those books that you could probably plow through in an entire day because it's so compelling, and then afterwards you'll just be left staring at a wall not knowing how to feel. For Taiwan, I'm recommending The Membranes by Ta-Wei, and this is one of my favourite books of all time. This is set in a future where humans have migrated to domes at the bottom of the ocean to escape climate change. Follow Momo, who is the most celebrated dermal care technician in the city. After a meeting with her estranged mother, she begins to question the bounds of gender, memory and reality. This is one of those books that pulls you in straight away from the first page, and the writing is great, but the ending in particular absolutely blew my mind to a million pieces. My breath was taken away. If you want a book that's a little bit weird, a little bit strange, a little bit out of the ordinary, but something that will stick in your brain for the rest of your life, The Membranes is the one to read. For Norway, I'd recommend Fixed Ideas. This follows two colleagues who work for the same paper, Espen, who is a literary critic, and Emily, who is a journalist. And one night after a work party, they end up sleeping together. We then follow them through what is a friendship or a relationship. They're not really quite sure, and the story explores loneliness and how our own self-consciousness can prevent us from really opening up in relationships. To me, this feels like the Norwegian version of Normal People by Sally Rooney. From South Korea, I recommend No One Writes Back. This is such an underrated book. I never hear anyone talking about it, but I absolutely loved it. It's such a heartfelt story. This is about a young man who leaves home alongside his blind dog and then begins traveling aimlessly for the coming years. Every person he meets on his travels, he dedicates them a number. He writes letters to all of the people he meets, but no one ever seems to write back. There isn't a huge amount of plot to this story, but it was so much fun living in the mind of this young man and getting to experience a little snippet of his very peculiar life. For me, it was one of those books where you don't realise how invested you are until you get to the end, and you're actually so sad that it's over and you're feeling so many emotions. From Egypt, I'd recommend Woman at Point Zero, which has the most beautiful writing ever, and it is such a powerful story. If there's one book from this video that you read, I would recommend it to be this one. In this book, we meet a woman who is in her prison cell in Cairo and she's due to be executed soon, but she's actually very happy to welcome this death sentence to relieve her of the pain she's experienced throughout her life. A journalist has gone into the prison and is interviewing this woman ahead of her death, where we get to learn of this woman's very tragic, painful, violent life. It is an incredibly haunting story of the reality of violence against women. I feel like there are so many books you could recommend for Japan because Japanese literature has had a boom in popularity, but one slightly more underrated book that I would recommend that I absolutely loved is Harlequin Butterfly. This follows an entrepreneur called Abrams who is trying to search for an infamous writer, Tomoyuki, who is rumoured to have the ability to write fluently in the language of any place that they visit. We follow Abrams as he tries every tactic in the book to search for this writer, but Tomoyuki is always one step ahead. This book is super short, it's only about 100 pages, so you could definitely read it in one sitting or in one day, and I would actually recommend doing so because then you get sucked into this little world, into this strange journey. For Italy, I'd recommend The Singularity by Dino Buzzati. This is the only book I've read from this author, but I've heard amazing things about all of his books. But this one in particular is absolutely weird and wonderful. In this story, we follow a university professor who has been summoned by the Ministry of Defence to take on a 2-year-long mission at a mysterious research centre. The research centre is isolated from the rest of the world amongst the mountains. He accepts the job and takes his wife along with him, but when they arrive, they actually have no idea what is truly going on at this research centre. This was originally published in its original language in 1960, which is crazy because Although partially this is a story of love and longing and desire, it is also about artificial intelligence, so I think this story was quite ahead of its time. This is The Living and the Rest. The author is from Angola, but the story is set on the island of Mozambique. Daniel and Moira are together and live on the island and are organising the island's first ever literary festival. But when the first group of guests arrive, the coast is hit by a cyclone. Everyone on the island is safe, but the bridge to the mainland is broken and their internet connection and telephone connection is completely severed. Left to their own devices, the authors who were in attendance of the festival and the residents of the island come together and start to bond as they have nothing else to do, but their days keep getting stranger and stranger. This book was hot and sticky and claustrophobic and mind-bending and absolutely bizarre, and when I finished it, I just had no idea what had happened really, but also absolutely loved every second of it. For Poland, I'd recommend White Nights. This is a collection of interconnected short stories about all of the residents of a small village in southern Poland. Each of the short stories centers itself around one of the characters and how they manage to exist and survive with the poverty and tragedy that surrounds them. The way these characters are written, it's as though you don't necessarily need to agree with the way that they behave or the way that they think, but the characters just demand to be seen and have their voice heard. The author is usually a poet rather than a fiction novelist, so her prose are very lyrical and beautiful. And finally, for Iran, I would recommend Blind Owl, in which we have a very isolated and unreliable narrator who has a very stretched relationship with time and reality. He experiences these very dreamlike memories that are fueled by opium and alcohol, and then he paints the scenes from these memories on pen cases. Reading this tiny little book in one sitting was an absolute whirlwind. It is incredibly bleak and dark, but the writing is absolutely exquisite, and I was left at the end completely unsure of what was reality. I'm not personally a huge reader of classics because I often find the language quite difficult, but Blind Owl is much more accessible than most classics I've read, so if you're looking for one, I would highly recommend this. I've read from about 50 countries so far, so I've definitely got plenty more books I could talk about and recommend for plenty other countries. So if you'd like to see more videos like this, please let me know. And as this is my first YouTube video, if there's any other types of videos that you would like to see from me, please also let me know. I am Read with Nicole on Instagram and Nicole Reads 98 on TikTok. Thanks for watching.